Welcome back to my Actuarial Work ABC, the podcast where I share my knowledge and experience from my actuarial work. I'm your host, Chi Beng, and today we're diving into the fourth episode of this podcast. Although it's the fourth episode, it's actually the first time I'll be sharing some important learning from my various actuarial modeling projects, especially using profit. To be more specific, we're going to discuss what makes a good profit model. If you're like many actuaries working in the valuation team of a life insurance company, you probably spend a good chunk of your time with profit. Whether you're doing cash flow projections or calculating reserves. But here's a question for you. Do you really know if the profit model you're using is a good one? Or, brace yourself, is it a black box? And before you say, no, my model's fine, let's dig into that a bit. In my first 10 years working with profit, I was just like many of you, as an active user from valuation team. I'd plug in the model point files, set up structure and settings, execute the calculations, and trust that everything was working just fine. At that time, the profit model I was using had thousands of variables. And believe me, trying to study every single variable in the profit library? Hey, just forget about it. Not to mention, there were tons of custom coding and workarounds, which make the profit model more complex. Well, I eventually learned the hard way what can happen when you don't fully understand your model. Let me share a quick story. One day, I discovered a small error, hidden deep in those thousands of variables. A simple division mistake. The denominator was supposed to be the number of policies, but it was set to 1. Sounds minor, right? Well, that tiny error led to a multi-million-dollar mistake. Talk about a wake-up call. So, what can you do to avoid turning your profit model into a black box? Here are some questions you should ask yourself. The first question is, do you really know how your profit model is set up? And the second question would be, do you have documentation that explains its design? Actuarial models are complex. Take premium income, for example, it depends on the number of in-force policies, which depends on mortality rates, which in turn depend on things like age and gender from the model point files. If you don't understand the backbone of your profit model, there's no way you can maintain it properly. And if there's no documentation to explain the model's infrastructure, good luck figuring it out when you need to make changes. At that point, you're basically making wild guesses and hoping for the best. Not exactly a recipe for success, right? Now, let's talk about the risks of having a black box profit model. First off, if you don't understand how the profit models are made, you're already at a disadvantage. And like in my case, errors can easily go unnoticed. They can be simple mistakes, but their impact can be huge. Second, every time you make changes without fully understanding the model, you're taking a risk. You could be introducing new errors, without even knowing it. It's like trying to fix a machine when you're not sure how all the parts fit together. Third, when we need to apply modifications on such model, we tend to implement workaround. In simple words, we bypass those variables that we are not 100% sure, and totally ignore their presence. And let's be honest, the more workaround coding you add, the messier things get. Before you know it, you've created something so complex that it's beyond repair. I've seen it happen, profit models that are so tangled up with customizations that no one can fix or even upgrade them anymore. So, how should we resolve the problems? I'm sorry to say that the only solution to this question is to redo your profit models. Finally, unpredictability. When a profit model becomes a black box, you can't predict how it will behave. I once had a participant in one of my profit training sessions ask, what happens if I select indicator XYZ for a product in my profit model? My answer? Well, since I'm not the one who built the model, so how do I know exactly what will happen when you select this indicator? And that's the reality with black box models. If we put it in actuarial terms, you only have limited confidence intervals to know what's going to happen. Alright. So we've established that a good profit model should never be a black box. Understanding the model Having proper documentation, and keeping things simple and transparent are some of the important aspects in making a good profit model. In the next episode, we'll be tackling another important topic, particularly redundancy in profit models. Ever feel like you're dealing with unnecessary variables in your profit models? Yeah, we're going to dive into that. So stay tuned, and let's keep those models clean and efficient. Thanks for joining me today. Hopefully I can have you again in the 5th episode.